Good morning. 9:30 on August 17th, 2021. Welcome to this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper. We are trying new technology this morning. I am staring face to face with an owl, which is going to assist us through this meeting. But if there are any complications, I am advised that for those of you joining us remotely, if you lose the feed, come back to the same agenda, the same Zoom link, and within 5 minutes or so, we should be able to reconfigure any issues that arise and join the meeting again. So again, the same Zoom link that you're using now that is on the website and on the agenda. For councillors, same thing. We're trying out this new technology. I'm not sure that we'll have to project to any greater degree than usual, but we don't have microphones, but the owl will pick it up. And we have Councillor McGrath joining us via video link. And 3 of us here, which is quorum, so we are good to go for today. Councillors Demota and Telegraphy may both join us later in the morning if they are able. With that, I'll call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Journeau, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of August 3rd, 2021 have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 3rd, 2021 as presented? Councillor McGrath, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have no presentation scheduled for this morning, so that takes us through agenda item 4 to agenda item 5. Is there any business arising from previous minutes? Seeing no indication of such, I will move to agenda item 6, department reports. We begin with Community and Family Services. And I don't have my usual screen access, but I presume that Mrs. Waxer is standing by. Oh, it's Ms. Riddell. Good morning, Ms. Riddell. Welcome to our new technological world, and the floor is yours, or the screen, as the case may be.
Okay, good morning, Mayor Ireland and all of council. And in front of you, you've got the, sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. The department report for Community and Family Services for April, May, and June of 2021. In Kathleen's absence, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a question. I just want to say that it's a very comprehensive report, very detailed. Nice to see you want to work with our people, a number of programs that our people are involved for this community. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Other questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau.
I'll open up some commentary. Is that one of the things that I was quite impressed with was the trends, social trends to note. That's these are things that we don't think about sometimes, and they're occurring in our community. And again, thank you for this department, their fine work that they're doing for, really putting them in great detail. I know that some of these cases may be very few or one of, but they are members of our community that need assistance. So thank you for that.
Ms. Riddell, I had a couple of questions. Firstly, with respect to the rapid COVID testing, can you confirm whether that continues and what sort of uptake there is, how many numbers of individuals might be getting that rapid testing?
Thanks for the question, Mayor Ireland, and through to all of council. The rapid testing continues, and I just had mine this morning actually. And as far as I can tell, there's quite a high uptake in terms of staff and just the willingness to participate, to do it as much as we can to keep our office environment safe as we interact with the public and our most vulnerable members of the public daily.
Thank you for that. Similarly, with respect to vaccinations in the community, and clearly not the role of your department for that, but I'm wondering whether any thought has been given to any sort of social norms campaign that might encourage more vaccinations. We had wonderful success in the past with social norms campaign, and it seems that it might be a fit here. I'm just wondering whether that is being explored, particularly with the cohort that appears to be somewhat lagging in uptake.
Yeah, thanks for the question again, Mayor Ireland, and through to all of council. It's definitely something on our minds for sure. And periodically we do also see funding opportunities that come up that could help support an initiative that addresses vaccine hesitancy. It has been discussed, although I would have to get more information, speaking with Ms. Waxer about really up to date whether we've applied for anything at this moment. I know it has been in conversation though several times, and especially with community conversations starting up again in September, I think we'll get a better sense of where different pockets of the community are at in terms of their desire to see a campaign of that nature.
Thank you for that. Those are my questions. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on that. I appreciate the consideration of perhaps applying for some funding to mount a social norms campaign, but I would like to look back to our earlier social media and broader communication campaign around wearing masks. We engaged council and through various avenues simply encouraged, this was before the mask mandate bylaw, encouraged wearing of masks. And couldn't we do something like that without needing additional funding, without necessarily going to a broader social norms campaign we've seen in the past? And wouldn't that be something worthwhile mounting simply with existing resources? So I put that question to anyone who from administration perhaps that cares to comment on.
Your worship.
Mr. Given.
Sure, I can take that away. That could be something that administration can look at for communications folks, both in the CFS department and our broader corporate communications. We can have a bit of a discussion and bring them back to council whether we see an opportunity to do that. I think one thing we have to consider is if council as a whole wishes to make a strong statement on that, we want to ensure that we're representing the views of the community through our municipal communication channels, that council was ready to admit that is, this is the expectation in Jasper, this is our social norm here, that we do encourage people to get vaccinated and that we're all trying to protect one another. And so if that was the desire of council, absolutely, that's something we could take back through administration, have a look through both our communications team and see if there's something we can do. I'm sure that that's something we can do within existing budgets, although our communications channels right now are pretty stacked full with our utilities installation project, the fire season and preparation for that, as well as gate parking. But I appreciate the point that we want to get the word out there that in Jasper we look out for one another
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Yes, Councillor Butler.
There we are. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the point about with respect to probably requiring some direction from council. So I would then put it to council, appreciating that we barely have a majority of council here today, but is that something council is interested in considering? Maybe we'll just leave that question for the moment and we could perhaps take it up next week at committee, whether council is interested in directing administration to mount a communications campaign with the attempt to ensure that vaccination is seen as a social norm in our community. And I think that's something that council could consider leading. So I'd like to suggest that we bring that up at committee for a broader discussion, as it was not on the agenda.
Just to solidify that a little further, I would be prepared to suggest that those of us here today, in fact, direct administration, put that on the agenda for next week.
We'll do that, Your Worship. We'll add that to next week's committee meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
I have another question going back to the report. Thank you very much, Ms. Riddell, for that report. I'm looking at item 2.2, COVID-19 emergency funding through the Rural Development Network. So I note that $27,000 was dispersed within the community. And it says the final report is due July 31st. So is that a report to whom is that report directed? Has it been done? Is it something council will see? That's my first question.
Thanks for the question. Through Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Butler. The $27,000 in emergency funding was received through the Rural Development Network. It is originally federal funding that was dispersed through that the RDN, the Rural Development Network here in Alberta. This report to council is a little, it's a little different in the sense that it was April, May, and June is the reporting period. So that's why it says that the final report is due in July. Of course, that report has been submitted, and I'd be more than happy to share that with council if the desire is there. The report detailed a lot of the narrative stories of what people were dealing with and how the funding made an impact. And to my knowledge, the Rural Development Network has received the report and is satisfied very much with the work. They've sent another link for additional funding that we could apply for. So, but I'm more than happy to share that with council if needed.
Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm certainly interested in just having a look at that. Is direction needed, or is that if it's a public document, probably no direction needed to share with council?
I think not. If it's available.
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, is that report, or sorry, is that program now ended?
The funding has ended. It originally was only a 4-month program, and we were successful in applying to extend the funding to be up to a year. So it was excellent and really useful in the community during this past year, during the pandemic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Riddell, for that report, and through you to Mrs. Waxer. Thank her for her hand in that. I don't see further questions from councillors, so we appreciate the thorough report as noted by Councillor Bureau, and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
That takes us to agenda item 6.2, Finance and Administration Department report. Mrs. Melichak, go ahead.
Good morning, Your Worship and Council. In front of you, you see the report from Finance and Administration up to July 31st. For budget process at the moment, we're working on 2022 to 2026 operating and capital budgets. I'm working on the first draft of the operating and capital budgets are now in the hands of directors. So the process has begun again. On assessment and taxation, I would just like to highlight that, you know, tax notices went out June 15th and due July 15th as normal years. The designated assessment review board clerk has set up all the hearings for the regions, and they are scheduled in October, November for this year. And as you can see, I've also included outstanding taxes. They've gone significantly down since the July 16th date. So you can see the percentages that they are outstanding on 2019, 20, and 21. And I included July 16th as well as up to my reporting day that I was working on the report, August 12th, which came down to $397,000 outstanding. I'd like to highlight that there's a small error here in the penalties assigned. The $31,387 should actually be under the 19 year, and the $47,416 should be under the 21 year. They got flipped. I apologize for that. They will be fixed in the report. And other than that, we had a retirement in our office. As most of you know, Diane Muir has retired as of June 21st, or 2021. And in the meantime, we've done a review of the office structure, and we posted a position for payables clerk position. Michelle Addition has been taking care of the payables since Diane's departure. However, we are pleased to announce that Rhonda Morgan has accepted the position and will begin her training coming next week. Paid parking, as you all know, we have the pilot project running, and we will be reporting on this monthly. Administration is very busy with resident portions throughout this process. Not so many visitors that the administration is dealing with, but many residents. Also included in this report is funding news on what we will either receive, what we've received, or will be receiving for funding on the municipal stimulus program, the MSI operating portion, as well as the capital portion, and the Canada Community Building Fund, which normally used to be the federal gas tax. So you can see the amount for 2021 will be close to the $3 million mark. And attached to my report is also the operating budget. We're very similar in comparison to 2020 in that 2021 revenues were sitting at about 68% and versus 70% in 2020, and expenditures are sitting at 45% versus 38% in the prior year. For council expenditures, you're sitting at 61% versus 57% the prior year. So again, very similar. And again, capital reporting has changed slightly from the last time that was brought to council in July. By the next time that I report to council, I will have more details that will come from directors and managers so that we can give more information to council on the status of the projects at hand. But right now, what you're seeing is the financials, and these financials change daily. So keep that in mind, please. And also included is our balance sheet, and that is the end of my report, and I'm open for any questions should there need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk. Questions from councillors? Councillor Janelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question, but once you have pointed out the changes that were needed in the penalties being applied, that changed my question a bit. But it does still support that those of us councillors who have to field questions of the public about hardships and so on and so forth, this is an interesting kind of statistic. Note that last September, granted it was later in the year, that's when the fewest penalties were applied. In July of 19, an amount of 31,000, which is fairly high when you compare it to supposedly 21, which is a hardship year under the pandemic. Recall we gotten a report from the Chamber of Commerce that they were in dire straits. Businesses just couldn't pay taxes. Well, that little statistic doesn't reveal that, so it makes it easier for us to have to field the question on the street in the public. That's a very small report, but it tells us a lot, and I really appreciate that. So thank you. My question would have been different when the statistic, the way it's written, but now that you've corrected it, changes, but it's still, it's very valuable for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report, Ms. Nolanchuk. I want to dig in a little deeper on the penalties applied report. So I just want to be clear that I understand that the $47,000 number was switched with the $31,000 number. Is that correct? And then the 17,500 number is correct for the 2nd of September of last year. So those were penalties, the $17,000 of penalties that were applied up to, or probably actually on the 2nd of September last year. You'll need to remind me, we did defer penalties last year to, was it to September 7th, 2nd? So no penalties were applied until then. I just know that last year we had a deferral in the application of penalties. So I assume that would affect that number, but I can't remember exactly how that works. Can you help me with that?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler, the deferral was up to September 1st. So then we're taking the day after the due date for the amount outstanding and then applying the penalty to the amount outstanding at that point.
So this year, on the 16th of July, which is the day after taxes became due, we applied $47,000, but penalties are applied monthly on remaining balances. Am I correct? So we would then anticipate that number probably incrementing up in September, depending on how many of those, how much of those taxes have already been paid. The number will continue to increment depending on how much of the outstanding taxes have come in. Is that correct?
The penalties are applied for the remainder of the year on the outstanding date. I'd have to bring up the exact wording on how it's applied to bring it forward. I can bring up the wording and give that to you on how they're applied. But there is one large posting that is done the day after on the outstanding taxes.
So if I haven't paid my taxes by the 15th of July, I'm penalized on the 16th of July. If I still haven't paid my taxes by a month later, will additional penalties mount, or is it a one-time in the year penalty?
Let me look at that, please. Thank you. I can come back to that. I just want to look how it goes through the general ledger.
Sure, and we could come back with that, but I guess then I'll move on to my next question and point, which was that council directed that administration come back to, or sorry, committee directed, I think it was, that administration come back to council with a tax deferral proposal. So we deferred tax collection in 2020. And I believe we made clear our intent to at least consider doing so this year, but we haven't seen anything and penalties have been applied. Councillor Connaught made the point that we have heard of difficulties and a concern has been brought forward to council. So my question will be simply, where are we at with that question?
Your Worship, I can speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon.
Councillor Butler, to your question, so administration with the penalties applied here, administration I think is showing that the 2021 year is not significantly different than what we would see in a typical year like 2019. That notwithstanding, the administration will be bringing forward a report with a recommendation, with an option for council to waive the 2021 penalties if council chose to do so. So the tax payment deadline has passed, and our committee meeting with respect to providing economic recovery funding was after that payment deadline. We will bring forward to council for your consideration an option for council to consider if you wish to waive that $47,000 in penalties. And council will be able to decide that in context whether that is a equitable thing to do, considering that there are a number of taxpayers who were able to pay their taxes in full by the deadline, and that the amount outstanding and the penalties are not, they are greater than in a 2019 year, but they're not substantially greater than the 2019 year. And so council will have to consider the equity issue and whether the 2021 year is really showing that much different than previous years. And we'll have a few other previous years, so you can see not just the 19 year, but maybe 18 and 17, so you can get a bit of a sense of, is $47,000 in penalties applied significantly different than any other non-COVID impacted year. So we'll bring that forward for council consideration. I would expect that that's something that we can bring together, if not next committee meeting, the one following.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much, Mr. Given. And I guess that's part of what I was trying to understand with my awkward questioning around where we're at with that $47,000. If that's all of it, then I would accept that it's greater than, but not hugely greater than 2019. But I'm trying to understand whether that is a number that may continue to increment higher, so that I could compare with where we might be in the 2nd of September. It concerns me a little that we're in the position where last year we proactively gave people that additional 6 weeks. Didn't do that this year, and now we're kind of into it and being forced to make a decision, in a sense, a little bit retroactively. Any context that can be applied as to, I suppose, how we might anticipate that $47,000 number to change as we go. I realize it changes day by day virtually. So, but that would be helpful in that decision that you're referring to.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, Mr. Given, you mentioned that, possibly waiving. I would rather maybe consider amending both the rate that we charge and the dates that we would maybe achieve, rather than totally waive. I think one of the commentaries that we did get from somebody who is experiencing difficulty is the severeness of our penalty. Yes, we do want to have the taxes collected, but what happens when they cannot pay? Penalties are severe. You do not reflect, say, current interest rates or anything that more reflects late payment. Is usually percentage per month. I think that something that we should be reviewing there is maybe the date. Yes, the date schedule. I believe Ms. Mellinger will have an answer on the schedule of when they're collected, but specifically the rate, in that it's more reflective of an interest rate than a penalty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I have one question, and it's in the 2021 operating budget for council, the first line item being travel and sustenance for council. We have budgeted $600, and as we are watching the province open back up with conferences and meetings in person, I have a question in relation to the $600. Did we intentionally draw money from that line item that used to be $5,000? And am I just not remembering that? or what was the process to get from $5,000 as allocated in 2020 to 2021, $600 as we venture into the end of this term? I think that we're going to see significant over budget in that line item. And I'm a little concerned about the new council orientation and whatnot starting in October and being significantly over budget there.
New council orientation was accounted for elsewhere. I'd have to look back on that. The 600 was based off of that we were not anticipating much travel and going into a year after COVID. Being that you might be over budget, it's in the end, what does matter is more on the bottom line of expenditures. So, you know, if you're under in major projects, but over in travel and substance, then that's kind of where we would be looking at maybe pulling from one area to account for another, being that things have shifted in the year. So we can work around this and make sure that it still works out within the context of the budget by the end of the year.
Mr. Gibbons.
Sure, Your Worship. Just to supplement Ms. Malinchuk's answer, I would absolutely agree. If you look at the sort of overall expenditure, in the 2021 year, we're at 61% of budget. At this point in the 2020 year, we're at 57%. So again, not materially different. We're at about the same level. And in terms of flexibility for new council training, there is the line item towards the bottom of that 2021 table that is specifically council training, $5,000. And so between that and council projects, administration is comfortable that we have enough flexibility to onboard the new council after the election.
Go ahead, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. And just to follow up, was that a decision that we made as council to take away the funding from that line, or was that an administrative decision?
Your Worship, and Ms. Malinchuk or anybody else that has the answer can correct me. I do remember a discussion at budget where councils explicitly discussed this, saying, well, we're not going to be traveling, or we haven't been traveling as much. I don't recall specifically if there was a motion that goes from that. I feel that there may have been, but I just don't have that at my fingertips right now. And I don't know if Ms. Malinchuk does. I see that she has her hand up, Your Worship, so she may.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Malinchuk.
That is exactly correct. It was based off of a conversation, not an exact motion, but what was discussed during the budget process time.
Thank you for that. Go ahead and continue, Councillor McGrath.
Just wanted to offer gratitude. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Malinchuk, I'd like to return just to the question of outstanding taxes. And it's just a question of clarity for me. But does outstanding equate with overdue, or are those different? So for example, there are taxpayers who are on a monthly tax payment program. And while those taxes might be outstanding for the balance of the year, they're not overdue, so they wouldn't attract penalties. So is that nuance recorded in your use of the word outstanding taxes? Can I include or exclude overdue taxes?
Your Worship, this is, sorry, just overdue. It does not include any of the
Okay.
payment plans that are in process. So those have been removed from the equation because they're set on that monthly payment plan.
Right. So that amount of about $400,000 is in fact overdue. Those were payments that were due and have not been made, as opposed to those that have, in a sense, been deferred because people have voluntarily entered into a monthly payment program.
Yes, you are correct.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions around the funding report, if I may. First of all, Ms. Melanchuk, is that $2.9 million? How would that compare to what we've seen in previous years? Is it, I realize some of these numbers go up and down year by year. Is it somewhat similar to what we've seen in the past?
Somewhat similar, yes. I can, in my next report, even do a couple of years back on the difference of the amounts received, but fairly similar, I would say. Sometimes the federal gas tax is half of that. Sometimes they've done a top up. So this year, it's double of what we normally see. But when we're looking at the MSI operating and capital, those are typically similar. And then the municipal stimulus program is new in this year.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Gibbon.
Just to supplement Ms. Melanchuk's answer, one thing council should be aware of and look for in those numbers, if Ms. Melanchuk is able to get previous years, the MSI capital has been declining slightly, but as a result of provincial government decisions over the last couple of years, we would have seen that decline compared to probably the 2015 numbers. There has been a gradual decline. The province has already forecasted that number will decline again going forward as they transition into the local government fiscal framework, which is going to replace MSI. So that's something we can provide some additional detail on, but it has been a material decrease, but has been gradual and repeated over a couple of years.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much for that clarification. I guess what I'm wondering then, the second question is, the table just says funding. Now I know this isn't all of the grant funding that comes into the municipality. For example, we regularly see mentions of grant funding through the CFS department. So what kind of funding, I suppose would be the question, is included in this table? Why are we seeing this and not other? What distinguishes these four kinds of funding? And if we were to see a table like this at the end of this year, including all of this sort of funding, whatever sort that is there anything else? Would there be another line? Or is this sort of all of the funding of that category that we're expecting this year?
Your worship, through to Councillor Butler, this is what we see through municipal affairs. There are so much more that we could be reporting on that also, say for instance, Mrs. Waxter would bring in her report on what she receives for funding and what. For some reason, I just got muted. This is on the municipal affairs side, and you will see other grants reported through other director reports. For instance, protective services might mention at some point their grant funding through FRIA, or Mrs. Waxer might talk about the grants received through CFS in her reports as well, but these are the ones that I see come in through municipal affairs, just on that side.
Fair enough. And these are the ones that you track through your department as opposed to other departments?
We track them all, but yes, this is tied to a large portion of the capital work that we do and how things are funded and whatnot. So a lot of this goes through myself individually, and but yes, I see all of the grants that come through obviously, through the other departments as well. But this is just on the administration side.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Melchett, go ahead.
If I might also add, when it comes down to Councillor Butler's questions more surrounded on the penalties applied. So looking into the general ledger more detail, it's this applied is, you're seeing this number being applied from January until July, or the penalty date, so, or September for the prior year. So then, yes, you'll see some changes in September, October through to December. And then there's another large penalty applied in January, just to give more information on how that process is being implemented through the GL.
Councillor Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a suggestion. I don't want it to make it too onerous in the work department, but the section that you've included under capital reporting is much appreciated. We have lots of projects underway, and I'm not trying to be critical of the lack of progress. I'm simply trying to be complementary to the information that's being provided to us. Again, we as councillors have to field questions in the public. It's impossible to keep track of all these things. So somehow if we could have this as a handy reference or more handy reference, I'm not sure. I don't have the technical expertise to put it on my phone, for example, but if somebody has that, that would be great. But secondly, I think that is a valuable reporting item in our budget preparation. We have not had this in the past, and we get presented after the budget is underway. So this is, while we're doing this in the cap, and we would have forgotten about that. So that's important. Or at least I feel that from councillor being informed in the budget process would be handy. In addition to this, so we do have capital projects from previous years that are outstanding, and that you might want to include that somewhere along the way as well. Keep us informed on that, because I know that there are some. We got one report earlier this year, and there was capital projects that were 5 years behind, and for no particular reason. But again, it's information that councillors should be made aware of, so that when they do enter these discussions on the street, yeah, we have a better picture of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. I see no other hands, so I will thank you, Mrs. Melchett, for your report. And oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler, I missed that.
Thanks, I apologize for leaving it like that, but it's just a question relative to what Councillor Janot since Melchett in the capital report. I understand that this report would include capital items from previous years that have not yet been completed, and they essentially get forwarded into this year. So we are seeing, if I'm correct, please let me know, we are all seeing all capital projects that are funded either underway or not yet underway, even if they were approved in a prior year. Am I correct in that?
Yes, you are correct. I think that Councillor Janot also might be speaking to maybe seeing, in prior reports, I have broken it down further to see also the year that it might have commenced. It's just a lot more work to put into and breaking it all apart, but it can be done. But yes, they are all on there, but the years that they began are not indicated on here. But some could have started last year or the year before and just got the carry forward, and they are all part of what was approved in the final capital budget for 2021. So that's, yes, you see it all here.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that, because that's the way I saw the report. Thank you.
Right, again, I will thank you, Mrs. Melchett, for your report and for your answers to many questions today. It's all very much appreciated. We can conclude I think then agenda item 7 points, or pardon me, 6.2 and move to agenda item 7. We have 2 requests for decision. For us today, 7.1, the Activity Center Renovation Project Management Services. Mr. Given, are you presenting on it?
Yes, Your Worship, I am. I'll be brief. This has come through committee already, so I think council members are aware of the context and the details. The recommendation is the council award the RFP for Activity Center Project Management Services to WSP in the amount of $98,790. As a refresher, council will remember that this is not the design and engineering or anything architectural having to do with the project. This is not construction of the project. This is simply administration securing additional support to manage the project and all the other phases that will come along and will come forward to council for decision. Administration did do an open process posting this opportunity on the Alberta Purchasing Connection. In response to that posting, we received 10 submissions from a wide variety of firms, including some local ones, as well as some international firms. And so there was a good variety. Administration reviewed the submissions first independently. A panel of 3 reviewed each submission independently and scored them independently. And then those scores were averaged. And that resulted in the table that you'll see in the report where we show the top 5 submissions or top 5 scores. You can see that WSP was the highest evaluated at 85 total points available out of the evaluation categories that are also contained in the report. A total of 100 points were possible, and WSP was the highest evaluated. I wanted to note as well that this is a request for proposals rather than a tender, and so price is not the only factor that administration looked at. We did want to consider what they would propose as a program for the work, whether they had experience with similar projects, the depth of the bench in their project teams that they were proposing, as well as the organization's workplace history and another number of other items. Administration believes that this support in terms of project management services will be a very key element in ensuring that the substantial renovation project, which we've received significant provincial and federal capital funding for, goes off without a hitch and delivers the best value per dollar for those grant monies received. So with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions, but you see the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any questions from councilors? Councilor Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a question per se, bit of a concern. If we're hiring a project manager to assist us, administration, and public to oversee a project, all things being considered in the way that you've evaluated and you've come up with the successful candidate, which is WSP. WSP does a lot of work for us already. They're into the initial design and maybe into the final design. Now they're going to be supervising. I don't see enough. I'm not going to say that there's a potential conflict, but I don't see enough independence there, especially further down the road when there's could be some change orders, for example. I don't see that independence that you would want to see in a project manager that is used by us to oversee a project that in progress.
Your Worship, Councillor Junot, fair comment. I appreciate that WSP as a local incumbent does do a significant amount of work for the municipality. The confidence that I guess I would hope to give council would be that at each stage, as we move through the project, we would ensure that there are transparent and defensible processes for awarding work to any of the support that we may need. So as we go to design and engineering, we would have a publicly available process where submissions would be reviewed, and the highest quality submission would be the one that we bring forward to a meeting like this in council chambers for council to make the award in public. And as we move on to construction, we would do that same process. So I appreciate that WSP is a recognizable name that does do a significant amount of work in the community already. It is possible that other branches of WSP may bid on other parts of the work, but council should have the confidence to know that the project manager would not take a role in evaluating submissions. That would be administration's role, and we would give our advice to you about those evaluations. And B, we would expect that if WSP was going to bid on any of the other work, or any of the other firms, frankly, that had submitted that could similarly do engineering and project management, if they were going to bid on any other portions of the work, we would ensure that there was that they demonstrated a rigorous separation between their project management function, which we're recommending according to WSP, and any other functions that they were proposing to bid on. So 2 parts there. One, any submissions for design and engineering work down the road would be evaluated independently by administration, would not be influenced by the project manager. And 2, administration would be keenly looking for a clear separation, a firewall, if you will, which is sort of the term that they use, a firewall between departments. And so we're aware that that could be a concern, but we believe that WSP and their submission was the best submission. Again, as you saw, the highest evaluated submission that came in for project management services, and we would commit to ensuring that there's full transparency and independence of evaluations moving forward on any other awards that we may need to take.
Secondly, not a follow-up to my question, but another comment that I want to make is, I really appreciate how this was presented and how the scoring components, the evaluation was done. You don't have to give us all 10, you've given us the top 5. Again, it's information that we understand, we're clear on the process, we're satisfied with the process. That's what I call open and transparent in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. Mayor Ireland, I have one question for administration. The duration of this project, allocating the money for 2021, will this contract be concluded 2022? I have some interest in referring a project management position in-house for the municipality of Jasper to 2022 budget considerations. But before I do that, I would like to have some idea of how long of a duration this contract is intended to be.
Mr. Gibbon.
Mayor Ireland, to Councilor McGrath, the intention would be to have this firm with us through the whole of the construction project, through to final sign off, to ensure that we don't have any miscommunication or missteps, and that we maintain consistency through the whole project. And so we would expect that this firm would be with us in this capacity on this project through to probably late 2023. And if there were any other items with respect to project management, the council wished to refer to budget, obviously could, but I would not expect that it would be helpful to the project to change project managers through the course of the project. So if the municipality needed to consider a project management function within our regular staff on an ongoing basis, that's something council could discuss at budget. But for the activity center renovation project, it would not be my advice that we would bring on an in-house project manager partway through that project. I think it would impact our ability to maintain that consistency, and which is really the goal of this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I actually don't have any questions. I asked a number of questions. Committee, one of them was to circulate among council the RFP itself, which of course is a public document, and I just want to thank the administration for sending that around. I read through it. I'm very satisfied with the process here. I know this process that was followed for virtually all of the major projects we do, and it was just enlightening to walk through this one with a little more detail than we sometimes do, and I appreciate that. So I'm prepared to make a motion if you wish to further.
I have one question for administration, perhaps, so that it doesn't get confused with debate. And I know that this was canvassed a week ago when we dealt with this, but I just want to confirm the actual funding of this contract award, if it is approved. So we have approved roughly $1 million for design and engineering. Recollection, this was discussed a week ago. We haven't formally approved the rest of the budget. So is this to be funded then from the $1 million that has been approved?
Your worship, the short answer is yes. This will, so that line item, the council approved a budget of approximately $1 million for design and engineering. Could have been maybe more broadly titled as professional services. But so the intent would be that the project management services proposed here would come from that item that has already been approved in the project budget.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Butler, if you wish to make a motion, then sorry for intervening in that.
No, not at all. Certainly, I'll go ahead to make the motion. Move that council award the contract for activity center project management services to WSP in the amount of $98,790.
Thank you for that. Is there any debate on the motion? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I'll just speak to one aspect of this relative to the query that Councillor McGrath raised, and just for, I think, context and understanding on the part of the public respect to services like this. I think it's important to understand that we're hiring a firm for activity center project management and not a person. Some may readily say, well, for $100,000, why don't we have our own person? And it's a fair question, but I have quite a bit of experience in working through these processes through my role in Evergreen, where we do a lot of capital projects. And time again, we in that venue have come to the conclusion that the person that could sit in a chair working for the organization to manage these various kinds of capital projects isn't out there. Every project is different. Every project has different technical requirements. A housing project is different from a marine project, and that's different from street projects. And you need the expertise. And in a small center like ours, I don't think that having that expertise on our own bench is a reasonable expectation. We, I think, have to go out to outside firms and bring in the expertise as we need it. Larger centers, city size of Edmonton, or someone would have a bench of project managers with the varying range of expertise needed for varying types of projects. So I only wanted to make the point that we're not hiring a person for a year. We're hiring a firm for the time needed to complete this project, and I think it's a good spend.
Thank you for that. I'm in a position where I support the motion, but I want to propose a friendly amendment. And if it is accepted by the mover, Councillor Butler, that's fine. If not, I will not make a motion in this regard, a motion to amend. But to add clarity and not to change the motion, I would suggest that the motion read that council accept the recommendation of the selection committee and award the contract for activity center project management services to WSP in the amount of $98,790. The RFP has already been let. It's a contract now that we're talking, I think. And the other words, I think it may add clarity to the public that council is not on its own initiative evaluating the proposals. We're basing our decision on a recommendation, and as Councillor Butler has indicated, we thank you for having circulated the RFP, and it's thorough, and we can accept the recommendation. So I think it adds some clarity, but I think that we should be awarding the contract, not an RFP. That's just a word change that I think is relevant. So I leave that to Councillor Butler.
Well, I actually did say contract. Oh, I didn't separately mention that I was changing that word. I had mentioned that at committee, that we don't award an RFP, we award a contract. So I did say that, and I said as a friendly amendment, the addition of wording around acceptance of the recommendation. Because that is actually an important part of the process and worth mentioning in the motion. So I accept that friendly amendment.
Thank you for that. And I was reading the motion and missed the verbal change from RFP to contracts. My apologies. All right, if that is clear now to administration, or have we totally muddied the water? It seems to be an acceptance that we are understood. Is there any further debate on the motion? All right, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Councillor Journeau.
I just want to add to the discussion that Councillor Butler presented us with about maybe the difficulty in hiring a project manager. I think that's one of the things that may not be clear to many is the actual definition or duties of a project manager. I don't know the duties of a project manager because I don't know the construction industry, but I do know that the ideal candidate is a retired construction superintendent. Somebody who has experience in the field, has dealt with contractors. That's how I have been instructed to do it. I see Mr. Gibbon kind of shaking his head, and I think it's important to bring that discussion up here so that the public and council is clear on what we want a project manager to be. Like I say, that's my definition or my understanding. I won't say my understanding, but thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Gibbon.
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Journeau, I think that is that experience dealing directly with contractors is very valuable when you're talking about a project like the Activity Center renovation. I would agree with you. But also, broadly speaking, project management, I think, has matured quite a bit as a discipline where they're focused in a project, which may or may not be a capital construction project, and that has a number of different moving parts that need to be coordinated. And the skills there are transferable. And so somebody may achieve a project management designation without ever having been a contractor. And I think that they would still be fully capable because the skills there are really about ensuring that risks are assessed, that stakeholders are engaged, and that whatever the project is moves efficiently from start to finish. And so that may or may not include directing, does a project manager need to know how to fit the filter in the furnace? Probably not. But what they need to know how to do, and there is a specific discipline and training, is how to convene the team so that all of the people who need to know, and they need to ensure that they check off the steps that are appropriate for that project. So accepting your point that on a large construction project like this, it is helpful to have that experience. That was something administration assessed. Another approach within the municipality, rather than hiring a specific project manager, could be to invest in our employees and encourage more of them to seek a project management designation, which is something that could be done through continuing education. So there are options for us to do this, but just to respond to your point that the ideal candidate for that is a retired construction person. That would be a benefit, but is not necessary in all circumstances.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. I will consider that agenda item 7.1 is
Yes.
concluded. We can move to agenda item 7.2, our second request for decision, the community conversations policy. Mr. Gibbon again.
Your Worship, actually, I'm going to be very brief. I believe Ms. Riddell is still with us, and she may wish to join. Council did get the full presentation on the policy over the course of a couple of committee meetings. There have been revisions made to the policy at Council's direction, and it is here for Council's final consideration and endorsement. I believe over the last few the most recent committee meeting, that there were some adjustments made to the policy specifically around roles of administration, to recognize that administration is not recruiting participants, rather seeking participants, which is, I think, a more broad interpretation rather than identifying specific individuals and trying to recruit them, but broadly seeking participants throughout the community. So that change has been made as a result of the committee discussion, as well as other changes that were made over the course of a couple of committee meetings where council reviewed this. It is here for council consideration and final approval. If you have questions about the details of the policy, I would like to refer those to Ms. Riddell.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. If Ms. Riddell wants to join us, I presume someone can make that happen. There she is. Thank you. All right, Ms. Riddell, if you wish to add anything, go ahead, but otherwise I will turn to council for any questions or emotion.
No, I feel like Mr. Gibbon summarized it really well, and I'm available for questions if there are any.
And from Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I don't have any questions. I am grateful for this being forward, and I have had ample opportunity to, in committee meetings, discuss this community conversations policy at length. If council is ready, I would like to present a motion that council approve the community conversation as presented.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any debate on the matter? I allowed the motion, and I should stop myself. I do have a question of administration, which is inappropriate in debate, but it goes back to our discussion a week ago about the name. And Ms. Riddell, while you're with us, we have community conversations now. Is it your sense that participants can identify themselves as a member of some entity when they join those conversations? Part of our discussion was, can we give this a different name that would allow a different degree of ownership or participation rather than just being engaged in an ongoing conversation?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship, through to all of council. I did watch the discussion from last week and can definitely see where some folks are coming from with the questions around the name. It has been my sense over the last 5 years that participants have not expressed concern at any time over feeling a lack of meaning or being part of something. As it is right now, people join the Jasper community team. And what you do as the Jasper community team is you take part in community conversations. And I think something that really struck me when we were thinking about the name was that a quote, Margaret Wheatley, I think is her name, is just that really significant change starts from very, very small conversations among people who care. And I apologize if I'm kind of botching that quote on the fly here, but I think that's the sense that I get with the group that exists now, is that people value the openness and the welcoming nature, the way we've positioned it at the moment. And wording is a big part of that, of course, when it comes to marketing a process and seeking or inviting people to participate. If they feel like it's relatively open, welcoming, and we would like people to just come as they are and share their perspective. I think so far, Community Conversations is working to convey that message to participants. And I know last week there was some concerns around people feeling part of something. And I think when they join, at least at the moment, they join the Jasper community team. So I think they do feel part of a team. And then what you do as a JCT member is participate in community conversations. So yeah, I don't know if that helps to speak to some of the comments or thoughts that were expressed last week, but.
Well, thank you. It does indeed. It expresses a level of comfort. And my sense, without speaking on behalf of council, because we've yet to vote, is that there is real genuine support for moving into a new regime that better engages members of the community. But if any part of that is hinged on a sense of belonging, then I would be one that would be prepared to make a change if anyone can suggest one. I know my own efforts were failures, so I look to anybody else. But you are intimately involved in the ongoing community conversations, and if you have that level of comfort, then you've expressed it well. I am content with that. So thank you. Councilor Butler.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mayor Ireland, for raising that. I was planning to ask the question and you have raised it. So I understand that those participants in the existing community conversations are asked to become members of the Jasper community team. That is not referenced anywhere in this policy, and that takes me back to my concern around what I see as, even though I am all in with the process and the framework that we are talking about here, that there is this lack of specificity that concerns me. So a question would be, will members who join the arts and culture or the recreation or the environmental responsibility community conversations be asked to be or seen as members of the Jasper community team? Or will only those who enter the social well-being community conversations be members of the Jasper community team? And I think that's a question for Ms. Riddell, but I'll take an answer or a thought or opinion from anyone.
Your worship,
Mr. Given.
if I may, well, Ms. Riddell collects her thoughts. I'll just say that from my perspective as a newcomer to the community, the Jasper community team concept really is one of inclusion. And so I haven't seen any evidence. Again, Ms. Riddell, being subject matter expert, will correct me if I'm wrong by all means. But I haven't seen anything that there's a formal application process to become a part of that. But it really is that concept that the municipality works with the community and through the community, both to engage the community in developing ideas and as a convener for the community to develop their own ideas and their own tactics to act on issues that matter to them. So I think the connection between the JCT and community conversations as proposed in the policy is less formal than might have been implied. But again, if Ms. Riddell, if I am off base, I would hope and expect that Ms. Riddell would correct the record for me.
No, thanks for the question, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler and all of council. At the moment, as Mr. Given indicated, it isn't a super formal process. There is, in fact, a, I would say, very, very brief, very informal and welcoming process to new members. So it's on our website. Members follow a link and apply to join the Jasper community team and therefore start attending community conversations. The only thing the membership application does is helps to give administration, or at the moment within the social context myself, an idea of where people are coming from and why they'd like to participate. And that I find very helpful, because if I see something where I'm like, this might not be what this person is thinking it is, then I can kind of intercept in advance of the conversation and have a pre-conversation discussion with a prospective new member. And I think, so for that value, there is value in having sort of somewhat of a process of welcoming new members and new members applying. But as Mr. Given indicated, I've never sort of felt like it needed to be sort of formal, like you must be a member of the JCT. As Councillor McGrath indicated last week, over here at CFS, there is some value in tracking and documenting members of the Jasper community team, because we have a nonprofit organization here in town, the Jasper Community Team Society, that exists to seek funding to enhance ideas that are collaboratively developed at the Jasper Community Team or Community Conversations table and administered by the Community and Family Services Department. So part of the rationale for having a Jasper Community Team at this point within the social realm is to be able to leverage as much external funding as we can and augment and enhance what Community and Family Services is able to offer in our community. Should we choose to go forward in that same way across the municipality, it could be an option to utilize the Jasper Community Team wording and have people be a part of that, but it's not necessary. And so I think we sort of opted to leave that out. Council was expressing specific interest in the community conversations themselves and that process. And that's what led, in my opinion, us to develop this community conversations policy and sort of leave the JCT out of it. And then that leaves some flexibility for us once the policy, should council choose to adopt a policy, when we're looking at the administrative procedures, kind of play with that and see what's going to work best, and also leave a bit of room for improvement. I think something I've seen over the last 10 years is a lot of willingness and encouragement from Ms. Waxer to change and adapt. And this process of engaging the community has looked so many different ways over the last few years. And I think to the community's benefit and to our benefit, because we're able to change and adapt things as needed. So I think we'd continue in that same spirit if this were to extend organization-wide, and just do what is working best, and even collect feedback from the community on the process itself and what could make it better.
Thank you for that, Ms. Riddell. Councilor Buck.
Well, I'm even more confused than I was. How does one become a member of the Jasper Community Team?
Your worship, right?
Because sorry, let me restate. I think the Jasper Community Team is an entity. I believe it is a society. I believe I received emails telling me that I'm a member of the Jasper Community Team because I think because I attended community conversations. So how does one become a member of the Jasper Community Team? One, is it an entity? And two, how does one become a member of the entity?
Your worship, I'll refer that to Ms. Riddell, but I believe she addressed that there is a minor application process. Appreciated that clarity. That's the kind of thing that we would spell out in a procedure related to this policy. But Councilor Butler, your question was specifically, is the Jasper Community Team an entity? And if so, what does it take for somebody? Is there, and if I can interpret a little bit, Councilor Butler, is there a membership fee? How does one become a member? Those types of basic questions. How does one know when they're not a member? Are those the types of questions that you look for Mr. Riddell to answer? Okay, so see saying yes. Mr. Riddell.
Thanks, Mr. Given, and your worship, through to Councillor Butler and all of council. My apologies if that was more confusing than helpful. I've pulled up a link on our municipal website that details sort of how a person becomes a member of the Jasper Community Team. In the spirit of inclusion, there is no fee and there's very little process to becoming a member. Anyone who lives in the community or works for an agency that serves the community of Jasper is more than welcome to become a member. The only folks in the past that I've had a discussion with before them joining have included media, for example, just in the sense that we want to make sure that the conversations are, that people at the conversations feel like we can have discussions about what's happening in the community without concern that a quote will end up in the paper. But essentially, to become a member, you can click on the link, which is at the moment just a Survey Monkey. And the Survey Monkey describes what Jasper Community Team members do, which essentially is take part in life stage focused community conversations about the community of Jasper. And it goes on to kind of prompt potential new members to indicate what they're most interested in taking part in. Here at CFS, we also do Immigration Coalition, which is sort of a community conversation specifically around newcomers, refugees. We also do a conversation specifically for newcomers, just to make sure that we're really, we're really hearing from the newcomer population, not just people serving newcomers. So there's a number of ways at CFS to take part in regular ongoing community conversations about the community. And here at CFS, we think of all those people as members of the Jasper community team. Again, whether we choose to go that route organization-wide, should council adopt this policy, would be later discussed, I think, sort of in the administration team in terms of the processes, but that's how it works currently at CFS.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. And Mr. Riddell, you didn't confuse me. I'm just confused. You don't need to own that one. So then, I mean, my earlier question was, will a member of these various community conversations be a member of the community team? So let me ask it a different way. If I wish to join and attend the culture, sorry, I lost the wording because I brought up a different screen. The culture and recreation community conversation. What will I be a member of? Will I be a member of the Jasper community team, or will I be a member of some other thing?
My sense, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler and all of council, is that that would sort of be an administrative process that would be decided and determined after council were to give the policy level direction that they wish to move forward with this approach. We'd sort of look at what would work best for the overall organization. Do we want people to be part of something, or do we want to just invite them to community conversations to start? So I think it is yet to be determined, and it would be determined on the administrative side of things once we have the policy level direction. The other question, I apologize for not answering. You asked previously if the Jasper community team is an entity, and I think that is worth clarifying. The Jasper community team is simply the group of people that get together to have regular life stage specific conversations about the community. That's all it is. So it is a group in principle, and you're part of something and you take part in these conversations. Separate from that and distinct from that is the Jasper Community Team Society. It's confusing because it's the same name, and anyone has the right to be confused about that, only with the word society at the end. The JCT Society is a registered nonprofit organization separate from the municipality, governed by a board of directors, and municipal council appoints one member to sit on that board. Currently, we have Councillor McGrath as an ex officio member of that board of directors. So the Jasper Community Team Society is a separate entity for sure, not part of the municipality, but exists solely to augment and enhance what the municipality is able to offer our community through external grant funding. So they are two separate things, but they work harmoniously.
Mr. Gibbon.
Your Worship, if I may, so I was also looking on the Jasper Community Team Society webpage. There's what I think is a helpful diagram, but essentially it demonstrates that there's the Jasper Community Team, which is the inclusive, anybody's free to join. We just want to make sure that you're there for the right purpose, that you know what you're coming to, and that as laid out in the proposed policy, that you're, if I can use the term very broadly, qualified. You know, that you are a Jasper resident, that you are from an organization that is serving Jasper in some way. That's the Jasper Community Team, and that's what our proposed community conversations policy would support. There is also separate, as Ms. Riddell highlighted, the Jasper Community Team Society, which is a not-for-profit organization that is separately established with its own board of directors, as she described. So I don't see, and if there is in the administrative background some process that has to this point been recognizing members of the Jasper community team, the broad free to join, anybody can be there to have a conversation. If those people have been being identified as members of the Jasper Community Team Society, then I would suggest that in our administrative procedures, we need to clarify that. And if that's not the case, then we should be able to report that to council now. Mr. Dell, is that, so people that join community conversations today through that very light Survey Monkey process that you identified, are they members of the Jasper Community Team Society that is incorporated as a not-for-profit?
No, thanks for the question, Mr. Given. I think that's a really relevant question. People who join community conversations are joining the Jasper Community Team. They are not automatically members of the Jasper Community Team Society. Just like many other nonprofit organizations, the membership for the Jasper Community Team Society is largely determined at the annual general meeting and consists of people who attend the annual general meeting for that nonprofit organization, or folks that contact the organization separately, seeking to join that organization as members. They're separate groups, but work together in terms of complementing each other. So the Jasper Community Team Society, it doesn't exactly sort of take action on anything. The Jasper Community Team Society as a nonprofit tends to take action, and it's built into their mission that they take action based on what the Jasper Community Team and the community of Jasper is saying that they need. But yeah, members are not automatically members of one and the other.
Councillor Butler.
Look, I am feeling awkward here. Mr. Dell referred earlier to if we agree to the approach, and I do absolutely agree with the approach. But what we're looking at here is not an approach, it's policy. And our job at this table is to make public policy. And the reason I said I'm more confused is that everything I'm hearing, you need to understand that in some way, the existing community conversations approach and process has a direct linkage to a not-for-profit society called the Jasper Community Team Society, and that there is a linkage there. And I believe there is a sense of membership there. I myself, as I said, have received emails inviting me to the AGM of the Jasper Community Team Society. So there is a linkage there. So part of the structure and process that we're talking about in this policy has a linkage to some other thing. And I've been stuck on this idea. I realize that community members need to understand what they are being asked to be a member of. But the new community conversations that we're setting up here around recreation, culture, and environment has no such linkage. And that linkage is not mentioned in this policy at all. So I just feel it's not fully baked. And I got stuck on this because I was saying, you know, we're creating a policy around conversations where we started our conversation about a policy around committees. So we decided we don't like the word committees. So we're going to use the word conversations, which I find to be non-specific. And I just don't think we're there. And I more don't think we're there now than I did coming into the meeting, because, and I'm not satisfied to pass a policy with the sense that, oh, well, down the road at the administrative level, we'll decide whether there are linkages to other organizations. That's not an administrative matter. It's core and central to this policy. So regrettably, I'm all in on the approach, but policy-wise, I don't think we're there.
Mr. Given, I see your hand, but if I can just interject at this point. And I share some of the concern expressed by Councillor Butler, but I view it perhaps differently. And so we are beyond a policy direction at this stage. We gave policy direction a a long time ago when we directed administration to come back with a policy. And so here is our policy. I think, in my experience, we have never approved a new policy in the absence of the starting administrative procedures. In this case, that's what we're looking at. And so we are told that some of these details will be worked out in the administrative procedures. And I acknowledge that administrative procedures are left to the discretion of administration in any event. Yet our practice has been, how does it look when we start? What administrative procedures are going to support the policy that council is making? Here we are making a policy, but without benefit of knowing what the administrative, at least the starting administrative procedures will be. And that, I think, causes some level of discomfort, at least for me on this side of the table. And I know that I asked last time we had this discussion a week ago about the administrative procedures and was advised that they would be developed. Again, those are in the hands of administration. They don't necessarily need, well, they do not need to be approved by council. And yet, it would be some level of comfort if we knew what the starting point was. And that is my view of, council's view of it. Mr. Given, I interrupted you.
No, your worship. I think what I'm hearing and appreciating is that there is a lack of clarity around the connection of the Jasper Community Team Society Incorporated not-for-profit organization and how it connects to this policy or doesn't connect to this policy. And I think that that's a point well made and well received by administration. I wouldn't expect that the administrative procedures would connect anything in this policy to that society. My understanding is that it's completely independent and really bears the municipality and council can choose to do what they wish with engaging residents on discussions about specific topic areas. And that's council's decision. The Jasper Community Team Society is not run by council. Does have an ex officio member, but it's not run by council. And I wonder if a report outlining the relationship between the municipality and the society might be something that would be helpful to council. Because I guess the question for council at a policy level, the description of how the municipality would engage residents and how we would have information flow from the municipality to those conversations, from those conversations to council, the types of conversations that we want to have, the frequency of the conversations. Is there anything fundamentally that is broken there? Like what I'm hearing is there is a discomfort because there's a lack of clarity about the role of the Jasper Community Team Society. I think that administration could provide information to council that would allow you to understand that. And I'm not sure whether that discussion impacts this policy at all. If there clearly is, if the municipality is saying, we want to engage our residents in these different, 7 areas of focus, we want to engage them using this process, and we want to engage them this frequently, which are all described in policy. That is fully within council's purview. Independent of that, council may wish to ask administration to provide information to you about how the municipality is or is not connected with the Jasper Community Team Society. So I just offer that to council. If there was a follow-up to this to say, administration, we would like you to help clarify for us what the relationship is between the muni and the society. That's something absolutely we could do. But again, I think that may be independent of the policy. And with respect to administrative procedures, from my perspective as a CAO, I think that there are a very small amount of administrative procedures that will be pretty boring to council related to this policy. It will be, how do people apply, and that would be the Survey Monkey kind of form that we would respond back to them, and that would be about it. And I think what you're seeing, Mayor Ireland, in comparison to past practice, a lot of the detail in the municipality's existing policies, a lot of the detail is actually buried in administrative procedure. So this is a much more robust policy. For example, the frequency and length of conversations and dates of conversations, saying that we have 9 per year, that's actually in council's policy. Where in the past, I think that level of detail might have popped up in the administrative procedures. So the approach we're trying to take here is to really give council a full handle on the policy direction and how that will be operationalized, and leaving the truly administrative things, like what is the email address that people will apply to the administrative procedure. So all that to say that I'm hearing a question about the relationship between the society and the municipality. I think that that's worthy of further explanation from administration. But I would suggest to council that that could be independent of this policy, because I think this policy can stand on its own. And we can additionally have that investigation about the relationship between the society and the municipality, provide additional clarity for council.
Councillor Bucket.
Thank you very much for that. I was once accused of being a stick in the mud, and now that's how I feel, but I just feel this is important. So I'm reading from the community website under the Jasper Community Team Society, and it says here, each month the JCT, Jasper Community Team Society's Board of Directors discusses the trends and opportunities that were talked about during community conversations. The society is unable to seek grant funding that can assist CFS in offering additional program services, initiatives, and events that address those trends. So that makes it clear to me that community conversations report to in some way, and that the community outcomes from the community conversations are acted on by the Jasper Community Team Society's Board of Directors. Now we're about to expand greatly the reach of community conversations, and we have an understanding in the community reflected in the website that those conversations inform the actions of a particular society, which is not council. But in our policy, community conversations are referred to as informing council, and again, the JTC society is not even referenced. So I think we either have to not call this community conversations, or we have to change that linkage, because what we're talking about here now is much more than what community conversations used to be. If there are linkages to off-council boards and organizations with decision-making power, we need to be very clear about that, because we're writing policy, we're not simply endorsing an approach.
Thank you. Mr. Given, I see your hand, but Councillor McGrath, I do apologize. I am distracted by our new surroundings, and I missed your hand earlier, and I apologize, but go ahead, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and no worries at all. I have been trying to take notes and follow the conversation as the councillor appointed to both the JCT and the JCTS. I feel some responsibility to offer some clarification, and I think one of the largest points of clarification that I can offer is that for the last year, the JCTS has been working on a memorandum of understanding with the municipality of Jasper. And that's one piece that would greatly contribute to the said report that's leaving lots of questions for all of council to be uncertain over. So we as the JCTS can work with administration to formulate a way to bring that memorandum of understanding forward to council. It has been on our agenda for quite some time to bring it to council, so that will definitely help bring some clarification to the table to understand more clearly the JCTS relationship with the municipality of Jasper. And this conversation, as though I do feel it's sticking us a little bit from moving forward with the community conversation policy that's in front of us. It lends great opportunity to think about this in context to the new conversations that could be held. So the relationship of the CTS with emoji, and the way that the CTS functions, you know, my intention from watching it function so well to now see art and culture under a community conversation label potentially, and to now see recreation as its own entity and to see environment as its own conversation lends a huge opportunity in my perspective to the possibilities that are out there. If we saw environment the same way that we saw social trends, and if we saw art and culture the same way that we saw social trends, and we saw recreation the same way that we saw social trends, we could perhaps be reaching so much grant funding and having resources allocated to proper functioning and streaming funds into the municipality through these really creative ways leaves so much to be desired, and so much so that I would even pause this conversation on this policy to come back with, you know, what is the Friends of Jasper Culture and Recreation Society? Is a great question that I've been asking for about a year, and I haven't really received an answer. Do they hold annual general meetings? And is there a way that they could be more functioning to be seeking grants for recreation in our community so that all of the recreation expenses aren't only from tax dollars? I believe that the conversation in the way it's going today, though I would love to see this policy passed, lends an opportunity to making this more clear for those councillors that are questioning it, and lends an opportunity to having a more functioning system outlaid if council is not ready to pass this today.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Mr. Given, you had your hand up earlier.
Sure, thanks, Your Worship. And for council members in the room, I'll just say that I had some feedback that I wasn't being heard well over the owl, so that's why I'm speaking a little bit louder. So if it sounds like I'm a little bit over the top in the room, you'll know that's just for video participants. There was a question from Councillor Butler about whether the JCT conversations, community conversations, are feeding the society. And I would just make the point, and as was discussed at a committee meeting on this topic a while ago, that the approach in Jasper to this point has been that participants in a community conversation, and I use participants intentionally rather than members, but participants in a community conversation are not prevented from taking away ideas or things they heard and choosing to act on them independently or together with other parties. And so it wouldn't be unusual for a topic or a theme to arise at a community conversation, and then to have another organization follow up on that topic, independent of the municipality. So I think that, you know, while it is fair to say that there is a much stronger link between the society and community conversations, it is not unlike other organizations that have developed out of community conversations. And so there is that informal linkage that's totally possible within the community, as I've had it described to me. And so I don't think that council needs to be directly concerned that community conversations are only there to feed the society. Community conversations are there to allow conversation to happen within the community, and that conversation can take many paths. What the policy is attempting to do is to better describe the flow of information from conversations to the municipality. That's what this policy is centrally concerned about defining. The policy does not preclude information from those conversations going out to other places in the community. And I think it's explicit that the intention is not to hold the information so only the municipality may act on it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. For myself, I think, I'm sorry, Ms. Riddell, go ahead.
Oh, no, my apologies. Mayor Ireland, through to all of council, I just wanted to echo a little bit what Mr. Given was saying. And indicate that although the Jasper Community Team Society might have a discussion about what kinds of needs are being raised at the community conversations, so too do many Jasper Community Team members or participants from community conversations. I've over the years heard of numerous examples where participants at the community conversations table took what they were hearing and took action totally separately from the municipality, building capacity for our community to address different things that we were seeing. A recent example is at community conversations, there were lots of discussions around food security during the pandemic. And some JCT members recruited others and or sought their participation, invited them to the table just so that we could have a more detailed discussion about food security and potential for a food rescue program. And then participants at that conversation went off and partnered together to offer what we now have as the Jasper Food Rescue Program, which is offered through a partnership between the Anglican Church, which is one community conversation participant, as well as the Jasper Local Food Society. So there was no implications for the municipality, but the municipality identifying the value of partners and stakeholders coming together with individuals to just talk about the changing needs of residents also just allowed for those folks to meet each other and work together on a really great program here in town now.
Thank you for that, Ms. Riddell. Going back to Councillor McGrath's earlier comments, I share her enthusiasm, although she expresses it more profoundly than I can. I think this is a real opportunity to engage other members of the community in the things that matter to them. We are looking at now instituting conversations around arts and culture, recreation and environmental responsibility. And that is good. There are people who are anxious for that opportunity. The comfort that I am looking for is that people who choose to engage in those conversations will be treated more or less equally with those people who are now engaged in the social well-being conversations. So those individuals have the benefit of support from the Jasper Community Team Society. What I don't understand is whether if someone wants to engage in the arts and culture conversation, they will be similarly supported. Councillor McGrath raised the Friends of Jasper Culture and Recreation, for example. Is that organization equipped now to offer a similar level of support to what the social well-being participants would get from the Community Team Society? The same questions arise with recreation and with environmental responsibility. So we're going to engage, we hope to engage at least the community in these additional conversations. But is each conversation going to be treated more or less equally in terms of support from outside agencies? And that concerns me. And it may be that all of that will be answered in the administrative procedures. I don't know that yet because the administrative procedures have not been presented in England. So I am in favor of adopting the motion as presented, but with the understanding before we can implement any of it, we need to understand what the administrative procedures are. And I hope that we can achieve a degree of equity between all of the conversations that might arise in a community and not have some supported by the Jasper Community Team Society and others unsupported in a similar way. Mr. Gibbons.
Your Worship, just in terms of support, the only area where administration or an administrative procedure can confirm or commit support would be with municipal resources. And this policy speaks to the extent to which council is directing administration to convene these meetings. And that would imply administrative support for that convening effort. In the report that was presented, there is a discussion about the resources that would be required, and we estimate that in future years, it would be about $5,000 approximately in administrative time to add the additional community conversations. And then we would look forward to recommending to council that you may wish to dedicate some minor funding of under $5,000 to support these defined focus areas, and if they have small things that they wish to do. You know, $5,000 between 7 different conversations is not a significant amount. It really small amounts. What an administrative procedure cannot do is commit the support or relationship between any external parties. The Jasper Community Team Society is an independent organization that administration has no ability to commit. And I believe the same can be said for the Culture and Rec Society that exists, again, which is maybe poorly defined here, but it is independent from administration. So an administrative procedure will not be able to speak to the level of commitment or really relationship between those other organizations, because they are truly independent of the municipality.
Thank you. Councilor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I suggest that if we are satisfied to move forward with the motion as it's been presented today, that we do so, and then we follow up with a motion to direct administration to do some more investigative work into the not-for-profits that are aligned with various sectors, such as the Friends of Jasper Culture and Recreation. I think that a report back to council on the makeup of that board would be interesting. How much, administrative time and resources are currently being given to that? Is it a functioning society that has met all of the terms that a functioning society needs to meet in the previous years? I haven't heard much of it in this 4-year term that I've served. So if it needs some work, maybe the people that are interested in culture and recreation in our community, the JCT members that attend the recreation community conversation, might find it also of an interest for themselves to perhaps seek a seat on that board. And maybe that's where the momentum of the alignment with not-for-profits comes from the enthusiasm of these newly created community conversations, to just use as a demonstration the functionality of the JCTS and how it relates to the JCT, and perhaps could be used as a model for future conversations to find their own momentum moving forward with, say, for example, a not-for-profit society being formed for environment.
Thank you for that. We are back, presumably, to the motion after long discussion rather than debate, I suppose. And I will take responsibility for that. Councilor McGrath, it was your motion to approve the community conversations policy as presented. Right. That continues to be your motion.
Yes, Mayor Ireland, thank you.
Follow-up direction afterwards, that's what I think I heard. All right, councilors, are you ready for the question? Councilor Butler.
Now that we're actually, I guess, debating the motion, I with regret, I can't support the motion. I'm simply not satisfied that the wording is there. We're just not there. It started out as a conversation with the name. I think that if part of the community conversations, if some of the community conversations, you see my problem, what are they? They are conversations, and some of them are connected to a particular department and a particular not-for-profit society, and others are not. It's just not clear, and so I just can't support it as it's written. I don't know the outcome of that motion being defeated here today. We have to talk about I'd be prepared to move that we postpone or move that we refer this question back to committee. Procedurally, I'll leave that to you, Your Worship, to think about whether either of those motions you would see them as taking precedence, given that we have a motion on the table. But if the motion comes to question as it is, I can't say.
Thank you for that. I think it is always in order to make a motion to postpone a motion that is on the floor or to refer the motion. So either one of those motions would be.
Then I'll, with leave, move to refer the question back to committee. Back is not necessarily referred to committee.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of the wording. I think that's good. The intent is understood that the motion would eventually have to go back to council, maybe, but to refer the matter.
Yeah, I would interpret it as meaning that the motion still is on the table in existence.
Yes.
To me, it's preferable to defeating the motion.
Councillor Journo.
Just a question, I guess. I'd like to, if we're going to refer it to whatever, I'd like to ensure that your concerns, Mr. Mayor, are included. That procedures are an outline of procedures after. I know this is probably having a lot of work, but I think I acknowledge your comment about procedures. Well, we don't compare them. We want to have some idea of some of the new data that's been provided here is like it's a bit much, and I think I support Councilor Butler's motion that should be postponed and referred back to the council. But to include your concern, Mr. Mayor, about the lack of procedures.
And I think in fairness, if it is referred back to committee, it is open for discussion on all points. Councillor McGrath, I saw your hand and Mr. Gibbons at about the same time, but I will give you precedence, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and certainly with the risk of only 4 councillors being in attendance today, I believe that the right thing to do is to refer this back to a committee meeting for further discussion. As Councillor Butler suggested, I would not disagree with that, as this policy is really important to bringing our community forward. Council decided that community conversations were valuable, and Council decided that community conversations were something to model other conversations off of, that would involve art and culture, that would involve environment, and that would involve recreation. And I still believe that that's the right direction to move in. As we look up the current policies, of course, it points to the current practices, and the current practices are being changed as we speak, or we're attempting to change them. We're attempting to broaden them, and we're attempting to include more community members in more valuable conversations in the municipality of Jasper. I agree with councillors' comments on the flow of information and the way in which we are hoping to align the not-for-profit with the community conversations is certainly of value. So I believe that postponing this discussion would be a good choice for today, and based on the conversations that have been had today. And I think that there's plenty of opportunity that can come from this.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Mr. Gibbons.
Your worship, just in terms of procedure, for your consideration as the chair, I wonder if either, I think we have sort of the main motion needs to be dealt with in some way. I suggest that it either needs to be, you're referring the motion to approve it back to committee, that the committee doesn't have that power. So I think what you're actually doing is either, I'd suggest that you could either have the motion withdrawn and then have a follow-up motion to refer the policy back to committee for further discussion. Motion could be defeated, or if the motion went for vote and it was defeated, that does not those areas where council can reconsider. And so, yeah, I'm not sure administratively if we have a motion that's on the floor, and rather than dealing with that motion, we choose to refer that motion back to committee, which was just the approval of the policy or not. I suppose the committee could amend it, but my suggestion would be the cleanest way would be either, if there's support generally and from the mover to have additional discussion at committee level, then perhaps the best way would be to withdraw the motion to approve and then have a follow-up motion referring the policy back to committee for further discussion.
That does work, and I thank you for that, Mr. Given. If council is content, Councillor McGrath, a motion can be withdrawn with the consent of councillors present. So I leave that to you, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I'd like to withdraw the motion that council approve the community conversations policy as presented.
Is there any objection to that withdrawal? Not. Thank you, Councillor McGrath. And then Councillor Butler, you wish then to make a motion to refer the matter back for discussion at committee level.
Yes, thanks. I'll move that we refer the matter back to an upcoming committee of the whole meeting. I realize that this correlates to the first of the two alternatives presented by administration. I appreciate that. I'm only leaving out the part that we might direct administration to make changes, because I don't think we know at this point what we want to direct administration to change. I don't want to engage in a make work project. I'm sure the administration has in the intervening week some suggestions they will make at committee. So I'll move that we refer the matter back to an upcoming committee.
I will ask if there is any debate, or are you ready for the question? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. I do want to say to administration and to you, Ms. Riddell, this is not any sort of indication of lack of faith in the very good work that has been done. We appreciate the efforts to date. This is uniquely a council struggle, not based at all on the support that we've seen from administration to get us to this point. So thank you for that work. We're not asking for much, although if we can have a sense maybe of how things are working through the community team and the society to understand how we would incorporate new conversations in that model, that would be of some assistance. But as Councillor Butler indicated, we're not asking or directing the administration to make any changes to the existing policy at this time. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. Would council be interested in me as a Jasper Community Team Society member, having the society consider bringing the memorandum of understanding between the JCTS and the MOJ sooner than later?
Councillor, pardon me, Mr. Given.
Your worship, if I may, if council wanted to give municipal administration some direction to bring forward a report identifying the relationship between the municipality and any associated societies or not-for-profit entities, maybe that would be the cleanest way. That way there's the administrative horsepower behind that and consistency. And we'll make sure that we get the Culture and Rec, Friends of Jasper Culture and Recreation organization as a part of that. So it's a more comprehensive report that gives council all the information it needs, rather than the JCTS, which Councilor McGrath would be able to get to the table. But then that would leave the Culture and Rec one out. And I would just like to see the information presented in a consistent manner, so council has the full details.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor McGrath, were you able to hear that all right?
Mostly, Mayor Ireland, and that council direct administration to bring forward a report, including more or less summarizing the relationship of any not-for-profit societies or groups with the municipality of Jasper.
Right. Can I take that as a,
Is that
as a
correct?
motion? Yes, Mr. Gibbon is nodding that that's what.
Yes, please.
Yes, what you have to say. Yes. All right, so I will accept that as a motion for direction. Is that clear to council? Is there any further debate or questions required? If there's not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. So some direction for administration. Mr. Gibbon. Well, thank you all again. That was a very long discussion. But given the importance of shifting from boards and committees to conversations, I think it's critical to the future of engaging community members in discussions that matter to them. And so I think it is vitally important that we get this absolutely right and not struggle later on with a failure at this time on Earth. All right, thank you all for that. It is now 11:36. We've been going for a couple of hours. I will call a brief adjournment for the comfort of those in this room and the comfort of those at the other end of the screens, and invite us to reconvene at 11:45 to conclude the agenda. Thank you. Rich Potter. Right, we are back in session. It is 11:46. We are at agenda item 8, bylaws. Again with 8.2, the Connaught Utilities borrowing bylaw for second and third reading, as we have received Parks Canada's consent to the proposed reading, assuming that it remains unchanged. Mr. Gibbon, did you wish to speak at all to the first bylaw? That is the bylaw 239, the borrowing bylaw to incur indebtedness in respect to a matter that is going to a local improvement. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, just briefly, in terms of the order of these two bylaws, the first is to enact the borrowing for the Connaught Utilities project. The second bylaw, the local improvement bylaw, which will is item 8.3, really speaks to how a portion of that project will be funded. So the municipality does the total borrowing under the item 8.2, bylaw 239. And then the subsequent bylaw that's here for council's consideration immediately following is the bylaw that would institute the local improvement tax that would collect monies to fund a portion of that borrowing. So just in terms of what comes, the chicken and egg, what comes first, the municipality borrows the money and then passes a bylaw to enable a tax to collect a portion of that money to pay for that borrowing. In speaking to the specific numbers in the bylaw, administration is still recommending these come forward. We do see some opportunities in some collaboration with parks with respect to some of the materials that will need to be removed from the site and some material that would need to be imported. There is an opportunity for some savings there, but we are not in a position to quantify that yet. And so we are bringing this forward for council approval. And council should know that administration will not borrow all of the funds at once, only to find out that we don't need them. We would borrow them sequentially so that as the project final costs become clear, that we will only borrow the amount of monies that are necessary to pay for the project. And there is zero expectation from administration that that would exceed the amounts that are here in front of you today. So with that, these have been certified by Parks Canada. And if I can just in advance, Parks Canada has also reviewed the local improvement as a landowner, and they have provided their concurrence with the proposed local improvement approach.
for that, Mr. Gibbon. Having received certification on the basis of first reading, is it open to us to make an amendment to change the spelling here?
Your worship, my understanding of Parks review is whether there are any environmental impacts. There are not, or land use planning implications. Neither one of these two, the land use planning implications are completely separate from the financial matters that are discussed in these reports. And so if there is a amendment that needs to be caught or corrected in terms of spelling, we can absolutely.
I was going to suggest then that correct the spelling of 45 in the 7th clause of the preamble. One of the oddities of the English language is that's the way you spell 4, but it's not the way you spell 40.
Thanks for that catch, your worship. We will correct that.
Do we have then a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 234, or pardon me, 239? Councilor Fine.
Thank you. I actually have a question, if I may. Mr. Gibbon, if we anticipate not having to borrow the full amount, just wondering, and I know there are ways that borrowing bylaws have to be written, but wouldn't it make sense that the bylaw would contain words such as up to or a maximum of? So I see this borrowing bylaw as saying that we will borrow that amount. Full stop. Are we then in some kind of awkward legislative position when we discover that we have to borrow less? Or does a borrowing bylaw have to, which I could imagine would be the case, specify an exact amount?
Your worship, if I may, to Councillor Butler's question. First, I just note that in the whereases, it does note that the project is estimated, speaks to the estimated total project cost. And so there's an acknowledgement, at least in the recitals of the whereases at the start. This is an estimate. And I think that in my experience, I have not seen a situation where a municipality was committed to borrowing the full amount if it was not required. I think that is understood, and that is a part of the regular practice with the Alberta Capital Finance Authority, that ultimately, when the submission for borrowing goes forward, it would be reflective of the amount actually required. And if council passed this bylaw, we would not be required to borrow that total amount. There is part of the reason that this is here today is because there are submission timelines that are required. The Alberta Capital Finance Authority has specific milestones where you must have your bylaw passed before their intake for borrowing. And so in order for us to be in a position to fund the construction as it progresses, we need to have this passed around this timeline. That's why it's here today. But council can have the confidence in knowing that this does not commit you to borrowing money that you do not require.
Go ahead, Councilor Butler.
Okay, thank you. I can accept that. Then my other question is plus 3.3. Wording says the net amount borrowed under this bylaw, and because that follows 3.1 and 3.2, where we say, here's the amount we're borrowing, here's the amount, this is how the amount's going to be paid back. What is meant by net amount? Net normally means the amount left over after some reductions or repayments. Why does it not just say funds borrowed under the bylaw? I find that worrisome lack of clarity.
Your worship, if I can, I have never considered the intent of the word net. I think it's, I don't know whether it has a particular relevance or requirement. I think the intent of 3.3 is really speaking to the use of the funds. I'm not sure that the word net is actually relevant. I think the greater intent of 3.3 is to say that any more money that you borrow under this bylaw has to be used for this project. Yeah, so I would defer. I don't know if Ms. Malinchuk is on the line still, but I don't have a particular concern about the word net being included or not. My default though would be to say that Ms. Malinchuk has provided this based on our past practice of other bylaws that we have approved for borrowing, that we would keep with her recommendation.
If I might engage in this discussion, I too had circled that word in that clause 3.3, the word net, but I took it to mean, in essence, the amount actually borrowed. Because when I read 4.2, and I assume that we will issue debentures, you will issue debentures, and you're authorized to do that. And that says they may be issued in any denomination not exceeding the amount authorized. So this is going to be secured by debentures, and they cannot exceed that amount. So the net could be less than the borrowing. Is the way I got myself through all of this. But I could be entirely wrong on that. But I read the net amount borrowed as the amount actually borrowed when I read that in conjunction with 4.2.
And your worship, if I could, just a very quick review. This wording is consistent with bylaw 123, the activity center borrowing bylaw, which uses consistent wording in the section. So this is how the previous one stepped in.
Any other questions of administration with respect to second reading of bylaw number 239? I do need a motion. I have a motion from Councillor Butler that council read bylaw number 239, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the council of the municipality to incur indebtedness by issuance of debenture in the amount of $7,150,000 for the purpose of servicing parcels GB and GC in the municipality of Jasper. We get the second reading. Okay. Councillor Connaught.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I've expressed concerns about this project before, and I still am very much disappointed with the enlarged amount for this project. And I might be tempted to vote against it, but the work is in progress, so I'm supportive, but I do have some question that won't affect this, but I just want to summarize that initially when we started this, the budget was less than half of what we're now borrowing. It included 3 parcels of land and included 3 cuts across the Connaught Drive. We reduced both of those to 2, and still we have a huge cost here. And somewhat disappointed that maybe we didn't go back to square one and start over. And that's what I want to express here. The work is going, so therefore, and I did support the first readings because I supported the decision that was made by a vote of 5-2 to go ahead with this project. But I just want to remind council and the public that, you know, there might have been another alternative here that would have made these costs a little bit less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connaught. Any further debate? I'll call the question in for second reading of bylaw number 239. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. And that takes us to bylaw number 240, which is the local improvement tax bylaw. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. We still need third reading of bylaw number 239. Councilor McGrath, you wish to make a motion for third reading?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ireland.
I have then a motion from Councilor McGrath that council give third reading to bylaw number 239, being the bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the council of the municipality to incur indebtedness by issuance of debenture in the amount of $7,150,000 for the purpose of servicing parcels GB and GC in the municipality of Jasper. There's no debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That was carried. Thank you for that. Now I can move to bylaw number 240 for second reading, the local improvement tax. Mr. Given, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Your worship knows, as I referenced before, this recognizes how the benefiting property owners will contribute to the cost of those installations. You can see in the detail that it is laid out by parcel on a total frontage basis. And so the costs are portioned there. The amounts are shown inclusive of rate of interest at 2.81% per year. And so full details are there. This has been circulated to the property owners. They are aware. Parks Canada has seen this and have provided a formal letter of concurrence with the proposed approach.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. I just have one question, and perhaps I should have asked it when we gave second and third reading of the first bylaw, but that bylaw that we previously just approved refers to an interest rate not to exceed 8%, but do we know the actual amount that we will pay in interest on that dimension?
Your worship, I would have to defer that or refer that question to Ms. Melanchuk. My guess would be that the interest rate may be unknown today because it would be the interest rate that is active at the time that we file with the Alberta Capital Finance Authority, and obviously it may fluctuate between now and then. And I'm seeing from Ms. Melanchuk that is, that my answer is correct, which I'm thankful to know that. But so the interest rate is not known. Obviously, there are no interest rates for borrowing that are at 8% these days, but we do not have the specific number because it would be the rate that is the prevailing rate at the time we file the paperwork with KCFA.
I appreciate that. Then in the bylaw currently before us, number 240, in the schedules are part of the bylaw. There's not an interest rate identified in the local improvement tax bylaw, but it can be inferred because the total levy, Schedule A, must be a combination of principal and interest. So the interest rate has been assumed. Is there any possibility that the interest rate that we are charging is different than the interest rate that we were paying?
Your worship, I'm going to refer to Ms. Melanchuk on the sufficiency of the interest rate that is included. But if you look at Schedule A under point number 5 in bylaw 240, you'll see that it says the annual unit rate for front meters payable for a period of 30 years at 2.81%. And so I believe that that describes the interest rate that is built into this model. Ms. Melanchuk can perhaps speak to why that 2.81% was chosen. I would imagine that she has built in some coverage for what she thinks the likely interest rates are that we would receive with our borrowing. But Ms. Melanchuk, could you speak to why that 2.81% was chosen?
Yes, sorry, I'm having problems with my camera. It is the date that I was working with for the percentage on the interest, and it is the best that we can do at this point, and it is the same process that we've used with any other kind of borrowing that we've done in the past. It is the best that we can assume during this time, and we will not know any of the changes until we come closer to the application date, which is in November.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gill.
Your worship, just in addition to what Ms. Melnichuk spoke to there, I believe as the municipality, we would have had a requirement to inform the property owners about the interest rate they would be charged. So while our ultimate interest rate is unknown between now and when we submit paperwork, we had a responsibility under legislation to inform the property owners about the interest rate they would be charged. And so that's why that has been determined here. Again, I would imagine that has been done with some look at what the current prevailing rates are and a bit of a forecast to ensure that we're not going to be underwater, if I can use that term, or backwards on rates.
Appreciate it. Thank you for that. Any other questions for administration regarding the Connaught Utilities Local Improvement Project tax bylaw, the improvement tax bylaw? Councillor Butler.
Thank you. And further to what we were just discussing, so to be clear, the interest rate that the owners of the properties will be paying, or the amounts that they will be paying will be inclusive of an interest rate that is defined here in this bylaw and will not change, even if the interest rate the municipality changes and or pays ends up being different from 2.81%. So if there is some variance between what the municipality pays and this posted rate, that variance it will pertain. And it's just the way it works.
Mr. Kevin.
Sure, your worship, to Councilor Butler's question, yes, that's correct. And a quick look on the Alberta Capital Finance Authority. They give a list of the indicative rates. And right now they're showing, as of August 15th, their indicative rate for 30-year borrowing is 2.6164%. So we are within the range there. Administration was looking at the municipality's interest to ensure that we were not in a position where we would pass a rate in this bylaw that was under what would be given by the province. So we are, council should know we have that comfort there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, any further questions for administration regarding bylaw number 240? If not, I would invite a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 240. Councillor Journeau, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Journeau that council give second reading to bylaw number 240, being the bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to impose a local improvement tax in respect of lands that directly benefit from the Connaught Utilities Local Improvement Project. Debate on that motion? Call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. And having already received Parks Canada certification, I can call for a motion to give third reading to bylaw number 240. Councillor Butler. I have a motion for Councillor Butler that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 240, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to impose a local improvement tax in respect of lands that directly benefit from the Connaught Utilities Local Improvement Project. All those in favor? There's a hand who's in favor. I think there are none opposed. That motion is carried. So those two bylaws now both been approved. That takes us to agenda item number 9, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing presented to us today. Is there any other new business for council? See no hands. Agenda item 8, councillor reports. Councillor reports. For the record, then I would just confirm that some members of the council attended a dinner meeting with the executive of the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association last week. They were in town and hosted us. I will hope that, as it was Councillor Demota and I sitting at a table with President Morishida, and he announced his resignation just days later. It was nothing that we said. And subsequently, and as a result of AUMA meeting here, Minister McIver, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, was in town to meet with the AUMA executive. I took the opportunity to again meet with members of council last week, Thursday afternoon. We had a very fulsome discussion about a number of issues related to Jasper, and I think that from my assessment, it worked very well to establish necessary relationships as we move forward with a number of issues, both at the provincial level and at the local level. Are there any other council reports? If not, upcoming events, there is a list of upcoming events. Nomination day is approaching. There is a Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce General Meeting on September 2nd, location to be announced. Do we know time? Time of that? Apart from the date? And my understanding is that there is a NETMA meeting scheduled for September 15th as well, although I'm not sure of the location of that. Time to have that on another agenda. If there are no other upcoming events or information, I will turn to agenda item 13 and call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Journeau, a motion to adjourn at 12:11 p.m. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for those members of the public who attended remotely, and Councillor McGrath. I thank you all, and I commend administration here in the room. This was flawless. It shows that your preparation was perfect. So I thank you all for that. This looks like a system that can work and will work in the future. So thank you all for the effort in that regard. And with that, we're done for the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.